The strangers did not ask for medicine. They did not carry a sick child. They did not hold a swollen hand. They did not limp or cough or beg. They simply stood at a distance, watching Lee's small house like it was a place they needed to understand. Lee felt their eyes before he fully saw them. That was something karate training had given him. The ability to sense attention. The way a room changes when danger enters quietly. Lee stepped outside and looked at the men with calm. He spoke in Chinese, not aggressive, but firm. The men answered briefly. Their voices were low and controlled. Lee couldn't understand the words, but he could read the tension. These men were not here to learn. They were here to confirm. Lee motioned for them to leave. They didn't argue. They nodded once, then turned and walked away down the dirt road, as if they had already gotten what they came for. The village exhaled slowly, but Lee did not feel relief. He felt something worse, a warning. That night, Lee trained longer than usual, punching the air until his arms burned. He wasn't angry. He was trying to control the invisible pressure growing around them. Lee watched him without interruption. When Lee finally stopped, breathing hard, Lee pointed toward Lee's chest, then toward the road where the strangers had disappeared. Lee understood. When people come looking, they rarely come only once. The next morning, villagers arrived early. Not only for healing, some came just to stand nearby, watching, whispering, listening for news. A farmer with joint pain sat on a stool by the door, rubbing his knee. A woman with allergies sniffled quietly, her eyes red. A boy got insect bites on his arm. Lee treated them calmly, carefully. He prepared warm compresses for the farmer's knee, mixing ginger and hot water and wrapping the cloth tightly but safely. He helped the woman with a cold compress and herbs to calm the itching. He treated the boy's bites with a cool paste, then covered them gently so he wouldn't scratch until they bled. As Lee worked, he noticed something. People were watching him differently now, not just with fear, with expectation. Some villagers had started telling others stories. Lee could see it in the way they spoke with their hands, the way they pointed toward Lee's house as if it was the center of the village now. By midday, more people arrived. From beyond the village, a man with a swollen ankle from a fall, an old woman with stomach pain, a child with a rash, a teenage boy with severe dandruff and scalp irritation, embarrassed to even show it. Lee handled the most serious cases, but he began pushing Lee forward more often. Not as a test now, but as training for real life. Lee treated the swollen ankle, keeping the joint steady, applying a warm compress later when swelling reduced. He prepared chamomile for the old woman's stomach and reminded her gently to rest. He made a mild herbal wash for the child's rash. For the teenager's scalp, Lee mixed aloe and a few drops of tea tree oil, showing him how to apply it calmly without shame. The teenager's face softened with relief. That moment taught Lee something deep. Healing is not only medicine. Sometimes healing is dignity. Word spread faster than Lee expected. Lee's house became a destination. People walked from nearby villages. Some came by bicycle. Some came in small trucks. Some arrived at night, hoping to be treated before others saw them. Lee noticed that the new visitors did not look at him like a curious stranger. They looked at him like a rumor that had become real. They whispered in Chinese. Lee didn't understand, but the tone carried respect mixed with disbelief. A boy from Nigeria, living like a Chinese villager, moving like a martial artist, healing like an elder. It did not make sense to them, and what does not make sense often becomes a story. One afternoon, a man arrived with chest discomfort and heartburn from heavy meals and stress. He held his stomach and spoke quickly, anxious. Lee examined him, then allowed Lee to prepare a calming tea. Lee made chamomile and suggested through gestures slow breathing and lighter food. The man bowed with gratitude. His pain had eased. Another day, a woman came with acne and irritated skin. Lee helped her wash gently and applied tea tree oil carefully, reminding her with gestures to keep her hands away from her face. He did not shame her. He treated her with calm respect. She left with tears in her eyes, not from pain, but from being treated like she mattered. Soon, Lee began to realize a dangerous truth. Every life he improved became a voice that spoke his name, and every voice became a road leading back to this house. One morning, the same strangers appeared again. This time, they were not alone. They stood with a village elder from another area, and behind them was a thin man with a notebook. The notebook man did not look sick. He looked like a recorder, like someone collecting information. Lee stepped outside, calm as always. He spoke firmly to them. The elder replied politely, but with pressure. The notebook man wrote while watching Lee. Lee felt cold. Lee's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not like being observed this way. The notebook man asked questions. Lee answered short and carefully. Lee couldn't understand, but he could sense Lee choosing every word like it mattered. Because it did. In places like this, attention could turn into authority. Authority could turn into control. Control could turn into separation. After they left, Lee closed the door and sat quietly. Lee stood nearby, waiting. Lee looked at Lee for a long time, then pointed to Lee's head, then to his own heart. Then he made a motion like closing a book. Lee understood the lesson, even without words. Be careful what you reveal. Be careful what you become. But Lee couldn't stop being what he was becoming. People continued coming. A young man with impotence whispered shamefully, barely looking up. Lee listened calmly, then directed Lee to prepare cocoa and ginger tea and demonstrate breathing and body strength exercises through simple gestures. The young man left with hope, not humiliation. An elderly woman complained of constant headaches. Lee encouraged hydration and rest. Give her water before any herbs. She looked surprised by something so simple, and her eyes softened with gratitude. Lee was learning the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing plants. Wisdom is knowing people. As weeks passed, Lee's face became known, but his name did not. Some called him the foreign healer. Some called him the boy from the sea. Lee didn't correct anyone. He rarely spoke. His silence made him seem even more mysterious. Mystery attracts attention, and attention attracts problems. One evening, Lee took Lee to the back of the house. He opened the old wooden box with the tools and the faded notebook. He pointed to a page covered in Chinese writing. Then he pointed to Lee and made a motion like stepping forward. Lee's stomach tightened. He felt Lee was preparing him for something, a future beyond this village. But Lee didn't know how. He didn't know where. Lee then pointed to the outside road, far beyond the fields, far beyond the quiet houses. His eyes stayed steady, like he was looking through time. Then, he pointed back at Lee. Lee felt a strange fear. Not fear of danger, fear of change. That night, Lee lay under the oil lamp and listened to the countryside. He realized how much this place had become his world. The smell of herbs, the steady discipline, Lee's quiet presence. And yet, something was pulling, like invisible hands, on his future. The next day, a group arrived from a larger town nearby. Their clothes were cleaner, their posture more official. They spoke with a firm tone, asking questions. Lee answered carefully. They looked at Lee. They whispered among themselves. One of them wrote something down. Then they left. When they were gone, Lee's calm finally showed a crack. Not fear, concern. He moved around the house, checking the door, checking the herbs, checking the notebook, as if making sure nothing important could be taken. Lee watched, uneasy. That evening, Lee didn't train Lee as long. Instead, he sat at the table with a brush and paper. He wrote in Chinese, slowly, carefully, like he was preparing something official. Lee stared at the paper. Lee saw his curiosity and placed the paper aside, covering it. Then Lee walked to the door and listened outside for a long time. The next morning, Lee told Lee to stay inside while he went out alone. That was unusual. Lee waited. Minutes passed, then hours. Lee sat by the door, hearing only village sounds. His mind replayed the notebook man's eyes, the official's whispers, the strangers watching. When Lee finally returned, his face was calm, but his eyes were heavy. He held something in his hand. A sealed envelope. Not Chinese village paper. Something different. Something official. Lee looked at Lee and spoke softly. Lee didn't understand the words, but he understood the weight. Lee placed the envelope on the table. Lee stared at it. The envelope looked like a door to something far away. A door Lee never asked for. Lee gestured for Lee to open it. Lee hesitated, then carefully broke the seal. Inside was a letter, not written in Chinese. Not written in a language Lee could fully read either, but he recognized parts of it. The paper carried stamps and formal marks. Lee's hands trembled. He looked up at Lee, confused. Lee's expression was serious, almost sad, like a father watching a child grow beyond his reach. Lee stared back down at the letter. His heart pounded again like the night he woke on the boat, because he felt it. This letter was not just paper. It was a turning point. A letter arrives from America. If this story inspired you, watch the next episode, Stories. Like, comment, and subscribe.